Angus, tell me about your personal experience of relocating to Singapore. What stood out?
Okay, so overall I'd say the experience was fantastic. Singapore's a great place to move and to do business in. One of the things that I think is important here is the family and making sure that if you move someone into, the other side of the world, you're thinking not just about them, but the people who are surrounding them that are maybe going with them. There's the concept of the trailing spouse. This is really important. I'd say that the secondments that I saw go poorly, which left with people leaving Singapore, expensive for everybody, was because of the family. It was generally the wife that was unhappy as a training spouse, but I saw it happen with the husband as well. The children part's really important, making sure that you can take people in, show them the schooling, get everybody comfortable with the move, not just the employee.
And you've built teams from scratch in Singapore.
Yeah.
How do you go about deciding who to hire? And do you need to do things differently in Singapore?
So deciding who to hire, I'd say, is very similar to anywhere else. You know, you look at the role that's needed, the tasks, you build your skills and experience matrix, and you hire for that in the interview. What I would say is very different is that process of hiring people. What I discovered, probably 6 or 7 people when I first flew out there and was doing these interviews. Interviews went fantastically well. They were really keen to join. I could tell that. It was a great fit, but it didn't happen for one reason or another. And I couldn't really figure that out. So I went and interviewed, I think 3 of them agreed to meet me again, and I really dug into that question. And it turned out to be their family. 2 of them, it was their parents, and one the grandparents who had really advised against it. And the influence of the family is really strong in Asia in generally, but specifically in Singapore, which was my experience. So I ended up taking the family out to dinner as part of the interview process. So I'd get people probably, definitely after a first, maybe a second interview, we like each other, I can tell it's going to be a good fit. So at that point I'm saying, look, please round up your family, I'd like to take them out for dinner, which surprised people. You know, it was a great experience. I had some lovely meals, met huge families. One guy brought about 12 people with him. And I just sat there and got a grilling on the financial stability of the company, basically, and what I'm going to do for their son or daughter.
Granny.
Yeah, from Granny. Exactly.
And people also talk a lot about coffee culture in Singapore. Why is that important, and what is it?
So it's relationships is the key to that. In Asia in general, definitely in Singapore, you need to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand before you can do business with them. Relationships come ahead of business. So my background is hiring sales and marketing teams, generally inside sales driven, so we would have people sitting on phones, remotely selling. That does not translate. You need to sit down, get to know somebody before you talk business. So that's one thing that's really important. The second part of it is access. If I wanted to speak to someone 2 or 3 rungs higher up the ladder than I would normally have access to without an introduction, I could reach out via LinkedIn and get an introduction to that person. They'd sit down and have coffee with me. So it's easy to get access to people, but when you do get that, make sure you spend time building a relationship with them. Ask them what they had for lunch. The typical greeting in Singapore is, have you eaten? And you know, that's a great way to start the conversation.
You run an HR function from London headquarters alongside a local HR team based in Singapore. Is that a challenge?
It is a challenge, but it's one that I relish taking up. And in fact, the local team are very much focused on dealing with the day-to-day and can respond to, the time difference issues there. And I act as a point of escalation on issues that emerge. But actually, the way we work is that there is a focus on trying to introduce a consistent approach globally. And then we work with the local team to ensure that, you know, we're consistent with the local team's practices in mind.
So you're able to put in place an approach that has the Charles Taylor brand and stamp on it across all your territories, but taking into account local peculiarities.
Indeed. I mean, our our culture and our values is a key differentiator in the markets that we operate in. And it's incredibly important that wherever you go around the world, including Singapore, that you know you're in a Charles Taylor setting as an employee. And so, yes, that's very much the approach we take.
And Charles Taylor's Singapore office, like many, is a mixture of local staff and expats. What practical tips can you give to ensure an expat hire is successful?
I think getting to know, making the time to understand the culture. I think the culture is very much important. I think on the face of it, there is a lot of common values, common themes working and living in Singapore. But I think where we found people have been successful is that they've taken the time to understand, how things are done in Singapore.
We've worked together on recruiting teams of individuals in Singapore. What would you say are the main considerations when planning to hire a Singapore team as a group?
I think working with a strategically and commercially minded legal partner that can provide appropriate and relevant, timely advice on how to hire people, how to settle people, and actually how to embed your business is a fundamental feature on actually recruiting people in that marketplace. Certainly that's been our experience.
And how about the dealing with the local market reaction?
I think that also requires working with people that are familiar with the landscape, and also getting a local perspective on how to manage client sentiment and in respect of some of the hiring or the business decisions we make. And I think at the heart of this is having a local partner, or a partner that has the international context as well as the local context to actually guide you through that process. That's key.
Ying, you act for many foreign-owned businesses in Singapore across various sectors. Is there a common issue that they all need to prioritise?
I think it's about settling in, and they can probably work on that by contacting the Economic Development Board in their own jurisdiction before coming over. They should be able to receive quite a bit of help from the agency.
The employment law regime in Singapore has changed recently. What are the important points?
Prior to the change, only employees who receive less than $4,500 a month would be protected. But after the change, they lifted the cap, so all employees are now protected under the Act. One of the main things is that employees can buy themselves out of the notice period, and not just employers.
And in which sectors, Ying, do you see the biggest opportunities in Singapore over the next few years?
There is a push for innovation and technology. So typically, I think fintech, deep tech would actually be very welcomed in Singapore, and obviously AI, data analytics.